She said it without lowering her voice. Not angry, not embarrassed. Calm enough that everyone heard. Don't touch me in front of my friends. Her hand slid away from mine like it had never belonged there. Laughter continued around the table. Glasses clinked. Someone made a joke I didn't catch. And just like that, I wasn't her husband anymore. I was a piece of furniture that had been bumped into. I stayed seated. I didn't apologize. I didn't joke it off. I didn't reach for her again. I looked down at my plate and noted, with the same detached precision I use at work, that my appetite was gone. My name is Michael Reed. I'm 41. I manage logistics for a regional transport company outside Columbus. I move freight through storms, strikes, broken bridges, and bad math. I solve problems quietly. People only notice my work when something stops moving. Lauren works in public relations. Image is oxygen to her. The room, the reactions, the way people lean in when she speaks. Tonight was one of her nights. Her friends, her circle, people who use words like brand and presence like they mean heartbeat. The photographer was there too. Evan, always there. Event guy, casual jacket, camera slung low even when he wasn't shooting. He didn't say anything when Lauren pulled away from me. He smiled at someone else, but his shoulder was already angled toward her, like that was his natural position. I noticed things after that. Small things. The way Lauren's phone stayed face down near his elbow. The way she laughed half a second sooner when he leaned in. The way she didn't look at me again for the rest of the night, except once, briefly, as if checking whether I was still where she left me. I didn't leave early. I didn't sulk. I stayed until the end, said polite goodbyes, carried coats to the car. On the drive home, she talked about the venue and the lighting and how well the night went. I nodded at the right intervals. At home, I didn't bring it up. I didn't need to. Something had already shifted. Not loudly. Not visibly. Just enough that I knew I wouldn't reach for her hand again unless it was offered. And I had a quiet certainty it wouldn't be. By morning, nothing had changed. That was the first thing I noticed. Same kitchen light humming above the sink. Same coffee grounds spilled near the canister. Lauren scrolling her phone with that half smile she reserved for messages that weren't meant for me. She kissed my cheek before work. A light touch. Automatic. Like checking a box. I stood still and let it pass. At the office, I moved freight across 3 states without raising my voice. A delayed shipment rerouted. A driver swapped. A warehouse issue neutralized before noon. The systems responded the way they always did when I stayed quiet and precise. It reminded me of something I'd forgotten. Silence wasn't weakness. It was control. Around mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed. A tagged photo. Lauren's face angled just right, lighting soft, background blurred. Evan had posted it. No caption. He never needed one. The comments did the work for him. I didn't like the photo. Not because she looked good. Because she looked positioned. Framed. Like someone else had decided how she should be seen. That evening, she mentioned an upcoming dinner. Same group. Different restaurant. She said it casually, like an assumption. I said nothing. Just nodded once. That night, I opened the shared calendar. It was something Lauren insisted on years ago, back when transparency felt like intimacy. I scrolled. Events. Openings. Launches. Dinners. Evan's name appeared more often than it should have. Not directly. Always attached to words like coverage or visuals or content. I didn't confront her. I didn't check her messages. I didn't need to. Patterns were my job, and the pattern was already complete. At work, I stayed late and watched trucks roll in under yellow dock lights. Each arrival logged. Each departure timed. There was comfort in that order. If something arrived too early or too often, it stood out. Lauren and Evan weren't hiding. They didn't think they had to. When I got home, Lauren was already dressed for bed. She talked about a client issue, something minor, something that required sympathy. I listened the way I always had. Eye contact. Stillness. Attention. She relaxed into it without noticing. When she fell asleep, I sat in the dark living room and replayed the moment from the night before. Her hand pulling away. Her voice. Not angry. Certain. That certainty was the key. I didn't feel hurt the way I expected. I felt calibrated. Like a system that had just received accurate data after months of interference. The next dinner was 2 days away. I already knew where I would sit. The restaurant was louder than the last one. Exposed brick, long communal table, the kind of place that made people lean close just to be heard. Lauren loved environments like that. Noise gave her cover. I arrived with her, On time, same as always. I wore the same jacket, same watch. No signal that anything had shifted. That mattered. People only look for change when you announce it. Evan was already there, camera nowhere in sight. But his posture said he was working anyway. He stood when Lauren approached. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. Space moved for him without being asked. I took in the room the way I would a loading yard. Who arrived together? Who waited? Who checked their phone before sitting? Patterns first. Emotions later. There was an empty chair across the table, next to Megan, one of Lauren's friends. Marketing consultant. Divorced. Quiet observer type. She noticed things without collecting them for later use. Lauren paused, just a fraction, expecting me to move with her toward the end of the table where Evan stood. That was the assumption. That was the script. I didn't follow. I pulled the chair next to Megan and sat down calmly. No rush. No hesitation. I placed my phone face down, folded my napkin, looked up and met Megan's eyes with the same attention I'd given Lauren for years. Lauren's pause extended long enough to be visible. She recovered quickly. She always did. Took her seat near Evan. Laughed too loudly at something he said. The sound was just a little sharp. Conversation flowed. I kept my voice low. Asked Megan about her last project. Listened without interrupting. Responded with interest, not charm. She leaned in slightly. Not toward me. Toward the conversation. Across the table, I felt Lauren's attention spike and scatter. She checked her phone. Adjusted her posture. Laughed again, this time a second late. Evan glanced over once. Then again. His smile thinned. No one could accuse me of anything. I didn't touch Megan. I didn't flirt. I didn't perform. I simply gave my attention where it was received. Halfway through the meal, Lauren said my name. Casual. Light. Like a reminder. I looked up, acknowledged her with a nod, then returned my focus to Megan as she finished her sentence. It was a small thing. Almost nothing. But systems fail from small things. When the check came, I reached for my wallet out of habit, then stopped. Evan had already handled it. Lauren smiled at him. Gratitude. Familiarity. I stood, thanked everyone for the evening, and said I had an early morning. Megan stood too, polite, surprised. Lauren hesitated, waiting for something I didn't offer. I left without touching my wife. From the sidewalk, I glanced back once. Lauren was still seated. And for the first time, she was looking for me. Lauren didn't mention the dinner the next morning. That silence told me more than any accusation would have. She moved through the kitchen faster than usual, phone already in hand, attention divided before the day even started. When I left for work, she didn't kiss my cheek this time. She said goodbye from the doorway without turning around. At the office, I watched numbers move. Routes adjusted. Timelines tightened. When a system starts to drift, you don't yank it back. You let it reveal where the tension really is. I applied the same patience at home. That afternoon, Lauren texted me a question about dinner plans for the weekend. Not a plan. A question. I answered with a neutral acknowledgement and nothing else. No suggestion. No follow-up. The typing bubble appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. That evening, she hovered near me in the living room while I reviewed a report on my tablet. She asked about my day. I answered accurately and briefly. She waited for more. I didn't offer it. Later, she mentioned Megan's name, lightly, as if testing a surface for cracks. She said Megan seemed to enjoy the conversation at the restaurant. I agreed. I said she was thoughtful. Then I went back to reading. Lauren didn't push. She never pushed when she wasn't sure of her footing. The next few days followed a similar rhythm. We shared space without sharing focus. At night, she scrolled longer. Her laughter from the phone was sharper, more deliberate. Once, I saw Evan's name light up the screen before she angled it away. I didn't react. I logged it the way I logged delayed shipments. Noted. Stored. By Friday, the group chat lit up about another gathering. A rooftop this time. Sunset views. Casual dress code. Lauren showed me the message, watching my face. I told her I'd be there. On the rooftop, the wind cut through the heat. Music low enough to encourage proximity. Lauren stayed close to Evan again, their heads angled toward each other like a familiar habit. I didn't interrupt it. I found a seat near the edge, next to Megan again. Not intentionally, but I didn't correct it either. We talked about work, about cities that changed too fast, about nothing that needed defending. Lauren watched from across the space. I felt it before I saw it. That shift in air when someone realizes they're no longer managing the room. At one point, Evan laughed too loud and placed a hand on Lauren's back. She didn't move away. I didn't look. Instead, I stood, excused myself quietly, and left early again. No announcement. No explanation. This time, I didn't look back. My phone buzzed as I reached the street. Lauren asking where I went. I didn't answer. The silence wasn't punishment. It was proof of concept. The following week, Lauren started noticing absences. Not physical ones. I was still there. I came home on time. I cooked dinner twice. I handled bills. I asked nothing. But the space where my attention used to sit was empty, and she kept stepping into it, expecting resistance. She brought up the rooftop night again, indirectly. She said Evan had asked if everything was okay with me. She said it with a laugh, like it was harmless concern. I nodded and said I'd been tired. That answer satisfied the surface, but not the current underneath. At work, I finalized a reroute that saved the company close to $90,000 over 6 months. No meeting, no announcement, just a quiet adjustment that would ripple outward. That was always my preference. Make the change so clean no one notices until it's permanent. Lauren suggested lunch midweek. Not a plan she'd made in months. I agreed. We met near her office. She talked about a campaign, about optics, about how people perceive alignment. Words she'd used to teach me how to behave in her world. She reached for my hand across the table. Casual. Public. I let her fingers rest against mine for a second, then moved my hand to adjust my glass. No rejection. No acceptance. Her eyes narrowed just slightly. Confusion creeping in where certainty used to live. That weekend, there was another event. Gallery opening. Evan was covering it. Lauren dressed carefully, checking her reflection more than usual. She asked if I liked her outfit. I said it was appropriate for the venue. She paused, waiting for something warmer. It didn't come. At the gallery, the pattern repeated. Lauren and Evan moved together through the space like a practiced unit. People greeted them as such. I watched from a distance, not detached, just informed. I didn't position myself near Megan this time. I chose another woman from the group. Claire. Married. Neutral ground. I stood beside her and discussed the exhibit with calm interest. Again, no touching. No signals. Just presence. Lauren noticed immediately. She drifted closer, interrupted once, then retreated. Evan watched the movement, jaw tightening. His lens pointed elsewhere, but his attention wasn't. Later, Lauren found me near the exit. She stood close enough that someone watching might assume familiarity was intact. She said my name softly. I turned, acknowledged her, and listened. She spoke about leaving together. I told her I was heading out soon. I didn't ask her to come with me. For the first time, she didn't know where I would be when she got home. That uncertainty followed her across the room. I left before the lights dimmed. Outside, my phone buzzed again. This time, I turned it off. Lauren came home late that night. I was already in bed, lights off, breathing steady. She moved carefully, like someone entering a room they no longer owned. She stood there for a moment, waiting for me to react. I didn't. The next morning, she tried a different approach. Warmth. Familiarity. She made coffee the way I liked it, asked if I wanted eggs. I said no, thanked her, and left for work 10 minutes earlier than usual. That deviation mattered. She noticed. At the office, I declined a meeting I'd normally attend. Sent a summary instead. The director replied with a thumbs up and no questions. Influence works best when it's invisible. The same principle applied at home. Lauren started asking where I was going in the evenings. Not accusatory. Curious. I answered honestly, but without detail. Gym. Grocery store. Walk. All true. None complete. She began showing up where I already was. Sitting closer on the couch. Asking about my day with more intensity than before. When she spoke, she watched my face for confirmation, for reassurance that the old balance still existed. It didn't. Midweek, she mentioned Evan again. Said he was stressed. Work slowing. Clients pulling back. She framed it as concern, but the timing was too precise. I acknowledged it and changed the subject. That night, I noticed she posted fewer photos. When she did, Evan wasn't in them. That absence was louder than anything he'd ever captured. At the next gathering, the dynamic had shifted. People looked between us more often. Conversations paused when Lauren entered. She tried to anchor herself to me, standing closer, touching my arm once. I didn't pull away. I didn't lean in either. Across the room, Evan watched. His usual ease was gone. He checked his phone repeatedly, adjusted settings that didn't need adjusting. He was used to being adjacent to power, not excluded from it. I spent most of the night speaking with different people. Men, women. It didn't matter. I was polite, engaged, unremarkable in the way that draws attention without demanding it. Lauren stayed within sight the entire time. She laughed when appropriate, smiled when spoken to, but her eyes kept returning to me, searching for a signal she no longer controlled. When it was time to leave, I said goodbye to the group. Lauren assumed I'd walk her out. She waited. I didn't move. She hesitated, then followed me anyway. In the car, she asked if something was wrong. I told her everything was functioning as expected. She didn't understand the answer, but she felt the weight of it all the same. By then, the imbalance was visible to everyone but her, and even she could no longer ignore its effects. Invitations shifted. Seating changed without discussion. People asked me questions they used to direct at Lauren. Not about work. About timing, decisions, logistics, where things were headed. At home, Lauren started filling the silence with explanations no one had requested. She narrated her day in detail, emphasized meetings, clarified who had been present. Evan's name appeared less, then not at all. The omission felt rehearsed. One evening, she cooked a full dinner. Music on, candles she hadn't touched in years. She wore the kind of softness she used early in our marriage, when attention was currency and she spent it carefully. I ate. I thanked her. I cleared my plate. I didn't linger. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table reviewing a shipping forecast. She stood across from me, arms crossed lightly, posture open but guarded. She asked if I was angry. I looked up and told her I wasn't. That answer unsettled her more than anger ever had. The next event was unavoidable. A mutual friend's birthday. Small space. Tight guest list. No room to hide movement. Lauren arrived early, positioned herself next to me deliberately. Evan showed up late and hovered near the edge, camera absent, role undefined. I stayed composed, spoke when addressed, listened more than I talked. When Lauren tried to draw me into private asides, I kept responses public and neutral. At one point, she touched my arm and held it a second too long. People noticed. She needed them to. I didn't respond. Instead, I excused myself to refill a drink and struck up a conversation with someone else. Not Megan. Not Claire. A man I barely knew. Neutral. Safe. The message wasn't flirtation. It was exclusion. Lauren watched the interaction fracture around her. Conversations continued without her input. Laughter rose and fell independently of her presence. For the first time, she wasn't directing the room. Evan attempted to step closer to her. She shifted away. That was new. On the drive home, she was quiet. Not tense. Thinking. Processing loss of altitude. At a red light, she reached for my hand. This time, I didn't move it away. I didn't close my fingers around hers either. The light changed. I drove on. Later, lying in bed, I felt her awake beside me long after the room went dark. Her breathing shallow. Calculating. She was realizing something fundamental. She hadn't pushed me away. She'd released me. And now, she didn't know how to call me back. The shift didn't announce itself. It settled in slowly, like weather changing while people argue about the forecast. Lauren began adjusting her behavior in small, careful ways. She asked before making plans. She waited for my response instead of assuming it. She watched my face when she spoke, searching for cues that no longer came automatically. Evan faded from the periphery. Not abruptly. Gradually. Fewer mentions. Fewer overlaps. When his name did surface, it was framed as inconvenience. Stress. Someone else's problem. I accepted the information without reaction. At work, I was promoted without ceremony. A title change. More authority. Same desk. I didn't tell Lauren right away. Not because I was hiding it. Because it wasn't relevant to the dynamic she was trying to repair. One night, she suggested we take a walk after dinner. Something we used to do years ago. I agreed. We walked side by side, not touching, the city quiet around us. She talked about how things felt different lately. She said she missed how close we used to be. I listened. I didn't reassure her. I didn't contradict her either. A few days later, she asked if I still loved her. The question was careful, almost formal, like it had been revised before delivery. I told her love wasn't the issue. Stability was. That answer stayed with her. The next gathering was smaller. Fewer variables. Lauren stayed close to me, but not possessive. Evan wasn't there. People noticed his absence more than his presence had ever registered. Someone asked Lauren about a project Evan usually handled. She hesitated before answering. That hesitation did damage. Not publicly. Internally. Later, alone at home, she sat across from me on the couch instead of beside me. She spoke slowly, choosing words with unfamiliar caution. She said she realized she'd taken certain things for granted. She said she hadn't meant to make me feel invisible. I acknowledged the statement without engaging the emotion behind it. She asked what I wanted. That was the first honest question she'd asked in weeks. I told her I wanted clarity, consistency, and space to decide what I was willing to rebuild. She nodded, absorbing the reality that reconciliation wasn't something she could manage with tone and timing. That night, she didn't reach for me in bed. She lay still, respecting the distance she'd created and was now afraid of. I stared at the ceiling, not angry, not satisfied, just aware. She wasn't fighting for attention anymore. She was waiting for permission, and I hadn't decided whether to grant it. The collapse didn't look dramatic from the outside. There were no scenes, no raised voices, no doors slammed. It showed up as absence. Invitations Lauren used to receive without effort slowed, then stopped. Messages went unanswered longer. Group chats moved forward without her steering them. Evan disappeared completely. Not even as a problem. Just gone. His work went to someone else. His name stopped surfacing. When Lauren noticed, it was already too late to trace where he'd slipped out of relevance. She tried to compensate. More effort at home. More care with words. She asked about my schedule and adjusted hers around it. She laughed softer. She watched more than she spoke. One afternoon, she came home early and found me packing a small bag. Not leaving, just reorganizing. Gym clothes. A book. A change of routine. She froze in the doorway, reading into it what she needed to fear. That night, she finally unraveled. Not loudly, quietly. She sat at the kitchen table long after dinner, hands folded, eyes unfocused. She spoke about moments she'd dismissed before. Me standing behind her at events, unnoticed. Me listening when she practiced speeches. Me handling things she never had to think about. Each memory arrived like a delayed impact. Not sentimental. Painful. Accurate. She said she hadn't realized when the shift happened. She thought I'd always be there. That I'd adapt. That I'd absorb. I didn't interrupt. She said she understood now that attention isn't permanent. That status isn't loyalty. That replacement isn't connection. When she looked at me, there was no strategy left. No performance. Just the raw understanding that something essential had broken while she was busy curating how things looked. I told her I believed her. That surprised her more than anger would have. I said belief didn't equal reversal. That trust wasn't a switch. That proximity didn't guarantee access. She nodded, tears contained, dignity intact. That mattered. This wasn't about punishment. It was about consequence. Later, lying in bed, she turned toward me but didn't touch. She whispered that she was afraid. I didn't respond immediately. When I did, I told her fear was appropriate, that it meant she finally understood the stakes. I said the ground she'd been standing on wasn't gone, but it wasn't hers anymore. Silence followed. Heavy, honest. In that silence, she stopped trying to pull me back. She started waiting to see if I'd stay. I didn't make a decision right away. That was important. Decisions made too quickly are still reactions. I needed to know whether what had changed in her would hold when there was no pressure forcing it. Days passed, then weeks. The house settled into a new rhythm. Quieter. Slower. Lauren stopped narrating herself. She didn't ask where I was going anymore. She didn't check my phone or linger near my screen. She focused on her work, but without the frantic edge it used to have. At gatherings, she stayed composed. Not performative. Not searching. When people spoke to me, she didn't intercept. When I chose a seat, she didn't angle toward it automatically. She waited. Sometimes I sat beside her. Sometimes I didn't. She accepted both outcomes without comment. That was the real change. One evening, we sat on opposite ends of the couch, the room dim, a show playing neither of us was watching. She spoke without turning to face me. She said she understood now that what she'd done wasn't a mistake. It was a replacement. A slow one. Social. Public. Comfortable. She said she wasn't asking for things to go back. She said she knew that version was gone. I let the silence sit long enough for the weight of that statement to register. Then I told her I wasn't leaving. She didn't react immediately. No relief. No tears. Just a stillness that suggested she knew better than to rush toward hope. I told her staying didn't mean restoring access. It meant starting from a different position entirely. That attention would be earned, not assumed. That my presence wasn't a backdrop anymore. It was a choice. She nodded. Once. From that point on, things didn't become easier. They became clearer. She didn't test boundaries. She respected them. She didn't demand reassurance. She let consistency speak. I didn't punish. I didn't remind. I didn't hover. I stayed, but I stayed as myself, not as a role. Months later, at another dinner with the same circle, someone joked about how solid we seemed. Lauren smiled politely. I said nothing. When I stood to leave, I didn't check whether she followed. She did. Not because she needed to, because she wanted to. And this time, when I reached for her hand, there was no audience. Just space. And mutual permission. Been through it. When they crossed the line, and you made sure they felt it.